Chapter 6. The Cost of Ambition. The waves had grown more still. It had taken Leshy a while to realize it, what with how much the scribes stayed in the woods away from the waters. But, once what used to rage with violent waves was now calm. The Kraken had disappeared. Whatever lay beneath those waters was either gone or had seemed to find peace. Leshy stood at the edge of the pier, deep in thought over everything that was unfolding. Was this not closer to what they intended for their world? Leshy's hooves began to move away from the sea and along the path leading to the bridges that connected their world. Did they not create this world for them so they may come together to make this game? To combine everything they had into a challenge for their player? Were the scribes not supposed to complement one another? Dead, beasts, technology, magics. They were originally made to all go together, with pieces that connected them all, made them inseparable from each other. That was the original vision for Inscryption, before the scribes even existed. If they were made to be reflections of those original ideas, then what was so wrong with them all? Why couldn't it all come together into a grand vision? Why couldn't they see the perfect version of Inscryption? He may despise their visions, but Leshy did not underestimate the skills of his fellow scribes. Grimora's joy for play was practically infectious. Magnificus could make beautiful sights, and as much as he hated that automaton, P03 did seem to have plenty of ideas for the cards. As misguided as they all were, they could perhaps see something greater, to be able to make the perfect game. But instead, they focused on everything but the game. Fame, image, or perhaps darker motives. It clouded their vision. Inscryption was torn between it all, yet none cared for the game itself. Even Grimora, who seemed to understand and help, would have her focus wane. Though, he never knew why, and she would never explain. Why would they all be made like that? Was it a failure from Casey? No. That girl cared too much about their creation. She poured her heart and soul into each of them. A full world for the scribes and minions for each of them that at least tried to be the perfect fit. Each with such care put into them, such love for what she made. She tried almost as hard as the Scribe of Beasts himself to see Inscryption truly realized. Despite his bias for her, Leshy was certain that she was not the cause of this. So why were the others also flawed? Why could they not see clearly? This was not the form Inscryption could be left in. Perhaps their tribes were meant to come together once upon a time, but the results were plain to see. The scribes still bickered even more as things broke down and the game was only growing worse despite Leshy's hardest attempts to perfect the game. This was all that came from the scribes working together. The world was breaking down. Leshy finally slowed his pace as he approached a strange island, one not usually on the map, covered in strange mushrooms with a horrid stench of decay to it all. The only things upon the isle was the mushroom-shaped hut of the mycologists and their old pier. They did not mind the intrusion, for they were missing at the moment. Leshy had searched here after the failed visit to the woodcarver. Their lab was nearly destroyed, and not a sign of them was left in there. But he would not fear for them. He would not fear for the world breaking down, people disappearing, Inscryption being left in this sorry state. For the Scribe of Beasts would fix it all once he found where the old data was hiding. He was so close, he could feel it. Leshy just needed his last minion to meet his expectations. For at the end of the old pier sat the angler. Leshy had ordered him to take fishing trips with him whenever he was done with the Challenger. The old man was usually late to meet with them or absent for those loops. He was too busy having to work on the plans for the next loop through the game. But it didn't matter. The angler was fine on their own. They needed to focus on finding the old data anyway. But Leshy's determined and stern expression faded as he heard the hulking man's surprisingly soft voice. "Leshy fish. Not come in a while. Good to see you again." The angler gave a rare smile, a sight only Leshy and the other forest dwellers ever saw. The hulking man patted the dock next to him, and Leshy moved to stand beside him. "Has there been any corrupted fish yet? Any sign of the old data?" The angler grumbled and looked back out to sea. "No old fish. No fish at all. Water's empty still." The fisherman looked down, his stone face more upset than usual. The situation was growing worse than Leshy thought. They had tried nearly every island, and the oceans seemed to all be completely empty. This was troubling. Where else could there be for the old data to hide? Where else could they search? There were still options, though. That old raft could finally have some use to it if he lent it to the angler. Perhaps it simply went deeper into the waters? Perhaps the traitor may know something. They were the last of the NPCs not affiliated with any scribe. Perhaps he could consult the other scribes as much as he hated to do that. P03's treasure might have some greater idea. Leshy fish. The angler's voice snapped Leshy out of his deep thought as he saw the angler staring at him with concern. How about things? Leshy sighed. I have plans. There is still room for us to find the old data. We may still find it before the others. We shall have our turn again. The angler looked away from Leshy as they finished, staring down into the murky, fungus-filled waters. Always plan, always scheme. But scheme not work. The angler cast his line once again. Scheme not make fish come back. It will work. Something has gone wrong in the game, but I shall find what it is and find where the fish and data have migrated to. Then, I shall make the fish come back. Leshy fish say that, but Leshy fish not control fish. Not control all the fish. The angler's grip on the rod grew tighter. Fish not care for scheme. The angler looked over to him. His gaze wasn't angry towards Leshy, simply stern and forceful. Leshy looked away, out towards the waters. He could not counter those points, but this plan would work. It had to work. It was their only way for the oil to heal, to go back to normal. What happened to goldfish and trapfish? The angler asked after a moment of silence. The man always spoke with such strength, yet now there was sadness to his voice. It was weaker than usual. That was right. Leshy still hadn't explained to him what had happened to his other subordinates. He simply gave the angler orders for where to fish. They had barely spoken a word to each other in the past few loops. The fisherman was completely in the dark. It does not matter. They will be back once we find the old data and claim power again. Leshy studied the waters. There had to be something more than these mushroom... Leshy fish! Answer question. Where are goldfish and trapfish? The angler's voice grew more stern and angry as they reeled back their line to cast again elsewhere. This would not be easy to explain. It would be better if he simply did not know for now, but... It will not matter, but... For now, the prospector and trapper are... missing. They're nowhere to be found in the woods or anywhere in the world of inscription. The angler threw out their line as far as they could, nearly slamming the rod into the dock as they did. They didn't make eye contact with Leshy. Goldfish and trapfish friends. I worry about them, yet Leshy fish say nothing. Why? Leshy fish know, but not tell me? Leshy paused for a moment. His mind raced with thoughts. Yes, he didn't tell the angler, but it was for good reason. He needed to stay focused on the search for the old data. He couldn't be weighed down by what was happening. All that mattered was finding it, because then there would be nothing to worry about. He was right not to tell him. It is something that will not matter once we find the old data. We mustn't let it slow us down. The sooner we find it, the sooner things return to how they should be. Yes, they would find it. They'd be returned to them, and it would be a wondrous occasion. Perhaps he could add something to their appearances in his game, make their return extra special for the player? The angler was still silent for a while. Was he simply processing the reasoning? No, he may not speak quite right, but he wasn't a dumb man. He understood. Leshy knew that. And what if old fish not found? What if old fish gone? The angler cast another line as they spoke. Their words were harsh and filled with accusation. Leshy shook his head. We will find it. Leshy fish so sure. But Leshy fish not know old fish. Maybe it gone forever. So what if it gone? What Leshy fish do then? How we save goldfish and trapfish? Silence. The two stood in utter silence as the angler's words hung in the air. Leshy did not have an answer or plan for that case. How could they change the game without the old data? If it truly was gone, would his minions be lost forever? No. They would find it. Leshy's plan would work. They needed to work. His dear friends of the forest would return to him. The old data was still here somewhere. It simply couldn't disappear. Leshy would find it. Out in the deep sea, he'd pull up the old data and everything would be brought back. He could restore the game and everyone in it before taking control once again. He would be able to run this game with his new ideas that he had waited oh so long to use. His plans were too great to be wasted in a dying world. We will find a way, and we will find the old data. Search the deep seas with the boat next time. It is the one place we haven't searched. Leshy began to walk away as the angler, the fisherman, had never let Leshy down. He was loyal, strong, and could easily handle a task such as this. Besides, a trip to the deep ocean hadn't happened in quite a while. The angler enjoyed those fishing trips. Leshy heard something drop into the pier. Perhaps he shouldn't have even bothered looking back, for his worst fear of what he would see was proven true. Nothing. He saw nothing there now aside from the angler's fishing rod. Even the Seekers were now disappearing from this world, those close to the old data. Leshy moved over to pick up the old rod and bait box. He would at least put them away, for when the angler was back, when things returned to normal, when they all returned to Inscryption. They simply had to. Leshy would make sure of it, even if he had to search the seas himself. A terrible thought began to cross his mind as he walked back towards his old cabin. If even those closest to the old data were starting to vanish, could the same perhaps happen to even the scribes themselves? They were the core of the game itself, entangled with the base mechanics themselves. The game and the scribes were inseparable, even when they took control. They could never be fully removed for that reason. If they could disappear, Inscryption as a whole would be gone. What would remain? Leshy would not need to worry about that. That would never happen. As long as the game stood, they would be safe. At least for long enough to complete their plans. To save what had disappeared, they would all be but faint memories of a strange glitch. Yes, a glitch. That was all this was. Leshy would start fishing once he's finished his plans. After all, he still needed to figure out special moments for all his minions now when he finally got another shot at the game.